The script, Shadows of the Outback. Please open it. I can't breathe, she begged. But when the lonely station hand lifted the sack, he froze. New South Wales, late 1870s. Dusk bled across the wide, winded scrubland like bruised gold, turning to ash. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, and the wind howled across the dry earth like a wild animal chasing ghosts. On the edge of that vast emptiness stood a lone station house, weathered and silent, its wooden bones groaning in the cold. Silas Vance pulled his coat tighter as he stepped into the wind. Dust curled around his boots, and his wide-brimmed hat flapped with each gust. He had meant to stay indoors. The fire was warm, and his joints ached more each year. But one of the horses had kicked at the stall again. He could not risk a broken board or a spooked mare. He walked toward the shed with the slow, steady gait of a man used to solitude. The leather of his gloves creaked as he adjusted his grip on the lantern. The flame inside it flickered, casting thin shadows across the path. Silas had lived on this land since boyhood. Built the shed with his father, buried his wife here when the fever took her, buried his daughter 2 weeks later. Since then, it was just him, the wind and the dust. He checked the stall. Nothing broken. He turned to go back, but then froze. There, beneath the scream of the wind, something else. A voice, barely a whisper. Please open it. I cannot breathe. He turned sharply. The sound came from the old shearing shed, a place he hadn't opened in months. The doors were warped and half-rotted. It leaned like it might collapse any day. He raised the lantern and stepped closer. Please, someone. I cannot. The voice was muffled, strained. The wind tried to swallow it again, but he had heard enough. Silas dropped his hand to the revolver at his hip, then pushed open the crooked shed door. The smell hit him first. Dust, sweat, something sharp and metallic, the kind of smell you remember from Blood and Fear. He raised the lantern. Light spilled across cracked shelves, rusted tools, coils of rope, and then a shape near a pile of grain sacks. One of them moved. It jerked. Then again. Silas stepped forward cautiously, boots silent on the dirt floor. It was not just a sack. It was a person, a burlap sack tied with rope, squirming ever so slightly. The voice came again, hoarse, desperate. Please, I cannot breathe. He set the lantern down and dropped to one knee. His fingers worked to untie the knots. Whoever had done this meant to keep her hidden. The sack peeled open, the smell growing stronger. A face, a woman's, young, barely 20 maybe. Her skin mottled with bruises, lips cracked. A filthy cloth tied over her mouth, her head still covered. Silas hesitated. Was this a trap? Had someone planted her to lure him out? His fingers hovered above the sack. She trembled, gasping through the gag, body thin and battered. Slowly, Silas reached out and pulled the cloth from her mouth. She coughed hard, air scraping her throat like sandpaper. Her eyes fluttered open, wide, frightened, impossibly green. They locked on his. Please, she rasped. Do not let them take me again. Silas's chest tightened. He gently pulled the sack from her head. Dark hair matted with sweat and blood clung to her cheeks. Rope burns marked her wrists. Scratches lined her arms. She blinked against the light. I am not here to hurt you, he said quietly. She winced, trying to sit up. No sudden moves, he added. You are safe now. You are at a station. My station. Her breath came fast and shallow. Tears spilled down her cheeks. They left me here to die. Silas took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. I do not know who did this to you, he murmured. But I sure as hell will find out. As he lifted her into his arms, she let out a soft, pained cry, but did not resist. Her fingers clutched his shirt as if it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. Silas looked once more into the darkness, then kicked the door shut behind them. The wind screamed. But inside the station house, something had changed. It was no longer just him, the wind, and the dust. Silas laid her gently on the cot near the fireplace, careful not to jar her injuries. The cabin smelled of eucalyptus smoke and old leather, warm and worn. He moved quickly. Clean cloth, basin of water. What little brandy remained. Elara Thorne shivered, curled in on herself, eyes wide but unfocused. Dirt streaked her cheeks, her wrists raw, lips cracked. You need to stay awake, he said softly. At least until I stop the bleeding. She blinked, barely nodding. He cleaned her wounds with quiet precision. The brandy made her gasp, but she didn't pull away, just clenched her teeth and endured. Silas worked in silence. His hands moved on instinct, hands that had buried too many, saved too few. When he finished, he pulled an old quilt from the cedar chest and laid it over her. Then he went to the stove, filled a kettle, Minutes later, he returned with a warm cloth. He pressed it gently to her face. She flinched. He pulled back. You're safe here. Understand? My name is Silas Vance. This is my land. No one will touch you under this roof. She whispered something, barely a breath. What was that? Elara Thorne. He nodded. All right, Miss Thorne. Try not to move. She exhaled shakily. I was with a coach heading north. They came at night, she said. 3 men, maybe 4, masks, took me while the others slept. Silas leaned closer. They said they'd sell me. Blackridge, a den there, buys girls. Said I'd fetch good money 'cause I was still clean. Her face crumpled. Shame, not tears. Silas stared into the fire. His jaw clenched. Why leave you here? He asked. They got spooked, she murmured. Thought someone was following. One hit me when I cried too loud. Next thing I knew, I was in that sack, choking. Silas didn't speak. I'm not lying, she said hoarsely. He met her gaze, bruised, bloodshot, but clear. I know, he said finally. She relaxed just barely. You'll stay here tonight, he said. After that, we'll see. She nodded, eyes drooping. Silas turned to go, then stopped at the closet. He pulled out 2 things, a worn wool coat, dark blue with faded buttons, his wife's, and a small ceramic jug wrapped in cloth. Back at the cot, he gently lifted the covers and tucked the jug at her feet. Just warm water, he said. Keeps the cold out. Then he laid the coat across her shoulders. Lavender and cedar still clung faintly to the fabric. His fingers brushed the collar. He paused. Elara, half asleep, opened her eyes just enough to see his face shift. Not just quiet and stern, but sad, hollowed, as if that coat had pulled something deep from him. He held it a moment too long, then let go. Silas pulled a chair close to the cot and sat, elbows on knees. You don't have to stay, she whispered. Yes, he said quietly. I do. He didn't sleep through the long hours. He watched the fire flicker, listened to her breath steady. He adjusted the kettle when it hissed too loud, smoothed the blanket when she stirred. At one point, she murmured something in her sleep. A name maybe, or a prayer. Silas didn't ask. He just sat there, hat in his lap, hands folded over the brim. By dawn, the wind had eased. Pale light crept across the floorboards. Elara slept deeply now, hands curled in the sleeves of a coat meant for someone else. And Silas Vance, who had buried more than most men could bear, sat silent in that wooden chair, daring the past to try again. The morning sun broke over the New South Wales hills, casting a golden haze across the dry pasture. Silas Vance stood on the porch, coffee in hand, his eyes scanning the land. Everything looked the same at first. Quiet, still, too still. Then he saw it. Fresh hoof prints, deep ones not from his horses. These were too large, too recent. They led around the side of the barn, where the ground was churned with more than hooves. Boot prints, wide, heavy. He moved slowly, following them past the feed troughs. His breath caught as he rounded the edge of the paddock. There in the dirt lay a dead dingo, a mangy stray that had been hanging around for weeks, sniffing after scraps. Its body was limp, twisted, a clean bullet hole between the eyes. Silas knelt beside it, jaw tightening. Whoever had come through last night didn't just pass through. They sent a message. He stood, eyes narrowing, followed the tracks around the property line near the ghost gums. Something caught his eye. On the trunk of the largest tree, burned black into the bark, was a crude symbol, a letter. Silas's blood ran cold. He'd seen that symbol before, years back on bounty posters and whispers in town. It marked the Iron Gate Raiders, a gang known for trafficking women across the territories. Ruthless, organized, rarely caught. They'd branded what they wanted, they were claiming. The hiding place. Silas turned and walked fast, boots kicking up dust. Inside the cabin, Elara sat on the cot, wrapped in the blue coat. Her eyes were clearer this morning, though dark circles still marked her face. He entered without a word and grabbed a lantern. Put your shoes on, he said. She blinked. What? We don't have time. She obeyed, struggling to her feet. What is it? They were here last night around the barn. Left me a message. Fear sparked in her eyes. They know. He didn't answer, just handed her a shawl and motioned for her to follow. They crossed the yard in silence. Elara limped slightly but kept up. Silas led her behind the main house toward the old root cellar. Dust choked the air as he pulled the doors open. Inside, it smelled of dry timber and oil. At the back, behind a stack of crates, was a trap door. He knelt, pried it open, and revealed a narrow staircase leading underground. What is this? She whispered. Storm cellar, he said. My family built it when the raids came close, kept supplies, hid when things got rough. He lit the lantern and held it out. You'll stay down here, at least until I figure our next move. She hesitated. I've been locked away enough. Silas looked at her, his voice low. This isn't a prison. It's a shield. You said they'd come for you. She swallowed hard, then nodded. She climbed down slowly. The cellar was small but dry, lined with shelves and an old cot in the corner. Silas climbed down behind her and set the lantern on a crate. He checked the door again, then stood in silence for a long moment. I've escaped before, she said quietly. Twice. First time I broke a bottle and ran. Got 2 miles before they caught me. They beat me so bad I couldn't walk for days. Her voice cracked. Second time I hid in a supply wagon. Made it all the way to a crossing before one of them found me again. They said next time they'd kill me slow. Silas didn't move. I don't know why I'm still breathing, she whispered. But I want to live this time. I want to live. The words hung heavy in the air. Silas stepped forward and, without saying anything, unhooked his old revolver from his belt. He placed it gently on the shelf beside the cot. If anyone comes down those stairs who isn't me, shoot! Elara stared at the weapon, then at him. I don't know how, she said. You'll learn. And if you don't, scream. I'll hear it. For the first time, she almost smiled. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small tin of dried meat, and left it on the shelf too. I'll check in every hour. Lock the trapdoor from the outside, but I won't be far. Then he turned, climbed the steps, and closed the hatch. Above, the wind had started again, wild and dry, hissing through the fields. Silas bolted the doors, then leaned against the frame, staring out over the land he knew now. This wasn't random. This was war. The wind had calmed by late afternoon. The sun sank low, casting long shadows over the dry fence posts. Silas was mending the gate near the yard when dust rose on the southern road. 3 riders. They came slow, deliberate, not like men passing through, but like men who already knew where they were headed. Silas stood straight, wiping sweat from his brow. He watched them ride in, boots heavy in the stirrups, eyes hidden beneath wide brims. The one in the middle lifted a hand in mock greeting. Evening, friend. Silas didn't answer. They stopped just shy of the porch. We're looking for someone, the middle one said. Young woman, dark hair, might have passed this way. She don't talk much, another added with a grin. But she's family, owes us. Silas's voice was low and cold. You her kin? The older rider spat. Blood or bond? Don't matter. Silas stepped forward. Kin don't stuff a girl in a sack and beat her half to death. The middleman's eyes narrowed. You're making some bold assumptions. I saw the bruises, Silas said. Heard her beg for air. If that's family, I'd hate to see your enemies. The youngest rider shifted. His hand brushed his belt. You best watch yourself, the old one growled. That girl belongs to us. Silas stepped up onto the porch, one hand on the butt of his rifle. No, he said. She doesn't? A moment passed. The middleman nudged his horse forward. The young one tensed. Then, Metal whispered. A gun drawn. Last chance, station hand, the boy snapped. Turn her over. Silas raised the rifle fast. One shot cracked the silence. Dust exploded near the horse's hooves. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. The 3 men jerked back. Silas didn't move. Next one won't miss. The riders backed away slowly. The middle one spat. You'll regret this. She ain't yours. Silas's voice stayed even. Not anymore. They wheeled around and rode off in a storm of dust. Silas stood still, watching the ridge until their shadows disappeared. Night came early. The wind stirred again. Inside, he gathered scrap metal, tools, screws. Then he headed for the shed. Elara sat up as he opened the trap door. Her face was pale but alert. They came, didn't they? She asked. He nodded. 3 of them. Claimed to be kin. She gave a quiet, bitter laugh. They always do. I sent them away. They'll be back. I know. He set down a small lock and latch. This will hold better than the bolt. She stared at it. You think they'd come at night? Silas didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small blade. He set it beside her cot, then placed a folded note next to it. She frowned. What's that? If I don't come back, he said, take the knife, head northwest, 10 miles. Old border hut. No one uses it, but it's got a well. Supplies. Elara's hands trembled. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Silas held her gaze. I know you want to live. He stood, climbed out and locked the hatch, reinforced the shed door with iron and beams. Each creak of wind raised his pulse, but his hands stayed calm. Inside, Elara opened the note in Silas's rough script. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not anymore. She folded it gently, tucked it under her pillow, then lay down, one hand resting on the knife, not out of fear but readiness. Above, the moon rose sharp and cold, and on the porch Silas sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark. The storm came fast, without warning. By twilight, the sky over the plains turned a deep, furious black. Thunder cracked like gunfire across the hills. Wind howled and clawed at the station house, rattling every window and board. Silas was still outside, fixing loose planks on the northern fence line. He'd told Elara to stay hidden, to bolt the trap door and not come out until he returned. But storms had a way of breaking plans. In the cellar, Elara sat curled under a scratchy blanket, Silas's note clutched in one hand. Rain pounded the roof like 1,000 fists. The lantern beside her flickered with a dying flame. Her throat ached with thirst. She hesitated, then made her way up the narrow stairs. The kitchen was dark, cold. Wind rushed down the chimney, shaking pots. She moved quickly to the counter where Silas had left a jug and cup. She lifted the cup to her lips, then heard it crash. Glass shattered. The window on the east wall burst in, sending shards across the floor. Elara froze, the cup slipping from her hands. Then, footsteps inside the house. Heavy, intentional. A shadow moved through the parlor. Elara backed away, heart pounding. "Don't scream," a voice hissed, "or I'll break your teeth." She turned to run. The man lunged, grabbing a fistful of her hair. She hit the floor hard, gasping. Dazed, she looked up, grimy coat, scarred jaw, eyes like stone. "Boss says you're worth a lot," he spat. "But not if you fight." He raised a boot to strike her. Elara roared, scrambling for the corner table. Her fingers found the knife Silas had given her. The man yanked her back, but she twisted, slashing wildly. "Steel-cut flesh." He screamed, stumbling. She tried to rise, but pain shot through her ankle as she staggered into the table. He was on her again, swinging. She dodged, slashed again. He grabbed her wrist, slammed her into the wall. "Stupid girl," he growled. "You think this ends with you walking free?" He raised a fist. The front door burst open. Lightning lit up the room. Silas stood there, soaked to the bone, rifle raised. Without a word, he fired. The bullets struck the intruder in the shoulder, spinning him into the hearth. The man groaned, clutching his wound. Silas stepped in. "Barrel steady." "Move again," he said, voice low, "and you'll leave in a box." The man froze. Silas turned to Elara. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly. He helped her up, letting her lean into him. She winced with each step. In the bedroom, he laid her gently on the bed. Her clothes were torn, her lip bleeding, and her ankle swollen. "Let me see," he said. He knelt beside her, brushing her hair from her face. "You did good. Held your own." Her voice trembled. "I thought I was going to die." "You didn't," he said quietly. "You're safe now." From the dresser, he pulled a tin box, rags, brandy. He cleaned her cuts, then turned to her ankle. He needed something stronger than cloth. At the foot of the bed sat a cedar chest. Silas opened it slowly. Inside, yellowed clothes lay folded neatly. He pulled out a soft flannel shirt, warm, familiar. He hesitated. Elara noticed. "Yours?" He shook his head. "Sarah's. My wife." He turned the cuff. Her name was stitched in delicate thread. "She sewed her name into everything. Said I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached." He smiled faintly. Then with care, he tore the sleeve and wrapped it around Elara's ankle. Tight but gentle. She blinked fast, eyes wet. "Thank you," she whispered. Silas stood, looking out the rain-smeared window. "She was everything to me," he murmured. "But you matter too." Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, something else took root. Not fear or pity, but something that could survive the storm. By the next morning, the wind had gone still. The rain had passed, leaving the plains soaked and quiet. Fog clung to the low hills. The air smelled like pine, wet dirt, and a tension too heavy to ignore. They both knew it was time to go. Silas didn't say much. He moved through the barn with quiet efficiency, saddling the horses, packing supplies. He folded a map of the surrounding land, tracing a route northwest with a calloused finger. Elara stood near the door, watching. Her ankle was wrapped tight beneath Sarah's old flannel. She still limped, but pain no longer shaped her face. Determination did. Silas fastened the saddle straps and looked up. "You'll ride the bay mare," he said. "She's steady. Doesn't spook easy." Elara nodded slowly, then hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Silas looked at her, eyes calm. "Because if I don't," he said simply, "no one will." They rode out at dawn. The road ahead was broken and rough, winding through dry creek beds and over jagged ridgelines. Silas led the way, his rifle strapped across his back, every sense on edge. By midday, the sun beat hard overhead. They passed no travelers. Only crows circled high above, gliding on the wind like omens. They stopped briefly in the shade of a sandstone bluff to rest the horses. Silas studied the map again, sweat streaking his temple. "If we can make it through the gap by nightfall," he muttered, "we'll be halfway to the town trail." Elara handed him water. "Is it safe?" He gave a wry smile. "Nowhere is." They rode on, but as they entered the mouth of the gap, a narrow canyon carved deep into red stone, Silas slowed. Something felt wrong. The birds were gone. No wind, no rustle, just silence. And then gunfire. A crack like lightning. Silas cried out. Blood bloomed across his shoulder as he jerked backward, nearly falling from the saddle. His horse reared, screaming. "Silas!" Elara screamed. 3 men emerged from the rocks, 2 on the ledge, rifles drawn, 1 blocking the path ahead. Their faces were cruelly familiar. The scarred man who'd attacked her in the house grinned. "Thought you could run, sweetheart?" Elara's pulse thundered. Silas slumped sideways, barely conscious. Without thinking, she grabbed his reins and kicked her horse hard. They bolted sideways down a narrow cut in the gap. Bullets flew past them. 1 ripped through Elara's sleeve. She didn't flinch. Her only focus was getting Silas out. Behind them, shouting, hoofbeats pounding. She ducked beneath a fallen log, pulled Silas's horse with her. The narrow path twisted behind a wall of stone. Out of sight, she dismounted. Silas groaned, collapsing into her arms. "Easy," she whispered, dragging him behind a boulder. His face was pale. Blood soaked his shirt. He pressed a cloth to the wound, hand trembling. "Stay with me." He blinked slowly. "You ride like hell. You're not dying," she snapped, tearing open his shirt with shaking fingers. "I wasn't planning to." He gave a weak smile. She ignored it. From her saddlebag she pulled the flask, poured brandy over the wound. Silas hissed through gritted teeth. "Sorry," she murmured. "You're better at this than I was," he muttered. She bound his shoulder with the same care he'd shown her. Every motion firm, gentle, deliberate. When she was done, she touched his forehead lightly. His skin was hot, but he was breathing. That was enough. Elara leaned back, heart pounding. Her own body ached, but she didn't notice. Something had shifted. Silas had once been the one to pull her out of the dark. Now she was the one holding the line. Outside, the canyon echoed with retreating hoofbeats. They weren't safe, but they had survived for now. They rode into the outskirts of Red Dust Gully by mid-morning. It was a forgotten little town, 1 main road, a leaning water tower, and a pub with broken windows. But for Silas Vance, it was the last place that still remembered who he'd once been. He dismounted slowly, shoulders still stiff from the wound. Elara helped steady him. "We'll find him at the law office," Silas said. The building was small. Inside it smelled of tobacco and worn leather. Behind the desk sat a man in his late 50s, Marshal Gideon Ross. He looked up. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. Silas Vance crawling out of the dirt. Silas smiled faintly. "Still breathing, Gid?" "Barely." Marshal Ross grinned. Then he glanced at Elara, eyebrows lifting. Silas's voice dropped low. "I need your help." The smile vanished. They sat. Silas told him everything. The marshal listened without interruption. When they finished, he leaned back. "I've heard whispers, girls taken, travelers vanishing, but nothing stuck. No survivors who'd speak." He looked Elara in the eye. "You're the first, and maybe the last." She met his gaze. "Not if we stop them." That night, the trap was set. An old shearing shed on the edge of town. Silas and Elara stood just outside. Inside, hidden behind crates, 6 deputies waited. The plan was simple. Lure them in, trap the door. Elara wore a dark shawl and stood near the entrance, head bowed. Silas leaned on a post, rifle ready. Then, hoofbeats. 4 riders. Elara's breath caught. It was them. The scarred man rode in front. "Well, well," he drawled, dismounting. "Didn't expect you to come back here, girl." "She didn't," Silas said, stepping forward. "We brought you." Then, gunfire. Bullets exploded into the night. The gang scattered, firing back wildly. The scarred man grabbed Elara, pulling her close. "Thought you could run forever?" he hissed. She struggled, elbowed him hard, and ducked low. Silas didn't hesitate. He fired once, clean, deliberate. The scarred man staggered back. Marshal Ross tackled another. The fight was ending. The scarred man collapsed against the wall. Elara approached slowly. He looked up, face pale. "You are the last one," he rasped. "The final piece." His hand twitched. Elara stepped back. Marshall fired. The body fell still. Several weeks had passed. The courtroom in the city was small but packed. Elara sat in the witness chair, back straight. She told them everything, and when Silas Vance stood beside her and gave his own testimony, low, clear, and unwavering, the room fell silent. Justice had been slow, but it came. Afterward, the marshal offered Silas a position again. He declined. "I've had enough of chasing ghosts," he said. It's time I went home, and this time, he wasn't going alone. Spring came late that year. Silas was on the porch, mending the old rocking chair. The front door creaked. Elara stepped out barefoot, wearing the faded shirt he once used to bandage her. Now it had wildflowers stitched into the sleeves, bright, uneven, full of life. She held something in her hand, a marriage certificate, already signed. "We could start over," she said. "If you want." Silas didn't answer at first. He just looked at her. He set the hammer down and pulled her into his arms. No words, just the long, steady kind of embrace that says, "You're safe now. You're home." The wedding was simple. Music from a fiddle. The wide sky above them turned golden. As the sun dipped low, Silas leaned in close and whispered, "That first night when you called out from the sack, all I heard was fear." He brushed a lock of hair from her cheek. "But now I hear home." If your heart ached when she whispered we could start over, or if your breath caught when he said now I hear home, then go ahead and tap that like button. Because sometimes the wildest parts of the frontier aren't the gunfights, they're the quiet moments when someone chooses to stay. Share this story with a friend, and subscribe to US Wild West Love Story for more tales of grit, grace, and second chances under the open sky.